I'm Nathalie Dupree. Today on Nathalie Dupree Cooks for Family and Friends, I'm going to make some real family favorites, so good you'll want to serve them to company. First, beef braised with mahogany onions, then squash and zucchini casserole, and parsley and chives potatoes. For dessert, I have a banana carrot sheet cake with banana cream cheese frosting, and it will all just about freeze. I just love this beef braised with mahogany onions. It's from the section of my book that I call Simply Smart, meaning that it's so good you could serve it to company, but it's also great for family. The ingredients, I'm just going to read them out to you. 3 pounds of boneless chuck or round roast, 1/4 pound of bacon sliced, 4 sliced onions, and 5 chopped garlic cloves. Preheat your oven to 325 degrees. And now let me show you how to go ahead and start cutting your bacon into slivers. And this bacon has been rubbed with pepper. It's just a particular favorite of mine, so I'll cut back on the pepper at the end. Pretty easy. You could just fold it over here and cut it into these little strips. It is so much easier if you cut bacon into strips to fry it than if you leave it whole. And sometimes I just leave it slice it when it's almost frozen and put it in and it separates. Now let me show you how to chop the garlic and the onions. Cut your onion in half. And by the way, I probably should have turned my board over. I know that you all work immaculately at home all of the time, so that you would know not to go from bacon to onion on your board, but life is not perfect on a TV set. And probably I should have an immaculate knife as well, but since no one is probably going to eat this onion, it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to cut it in half. Then you put the side, you don't want to try to cut on the round, wobbly stuff part because you cut yourself. So that's the whole reason for this. And also, if you put the cut part away from you, you don't cry. So then you slice down like that. And I leave a little bit of the end on, the root end of my onion on, just to hold it together so that when I get to the very end, and I'm picking my knife up, but after a while, you can really get to a point where you just slide. Of course, I've chosen the chopping side of this knife, of this board to work on. Now move them away from yourself so you don't cry. As soon as you've got it done, move it away so you don't cry, and you'll put yours right into your pan. And now let me show you the garlic. Take your knife, lay it flat on your garlic, give it a swack, and you see the peel comes right off. In fact, I think I over-swacked. That's my first mistake, as you know, in life, was over-swacking this garlic. And go over here and take, now why won't it do that? Well, that does not do because I'm on television. Those of you at home, this will never happen to you. Okay, now go ahead here now and cut into the root, same way. Of course, this is so swacked, you could just go ahead and chop it. I'm going to have to go on the other side of that board because this is ridiculous to cut on this side. Here we go, even though it's got some little bacon on there. And just cut like this, and then over like this. At home, you have hot water, too. Okay, there we go. And that's done. Just chop it, or you can mush it. Sometimes I just mush it with a sharp knife. Now, you've got it all chopped, and I do all of that at the beginning of the day. In fact, when I look at a menu, I get all the onions for the whole menu chopped and all the garlic chopped all at one time. And in fact, if I know what I'm cooking later in the day or the next day, I might even do it all early for all the recipes that I'm doing. That way you only get your hands garlicky and oniony once. So you put your bacon and your onion and your garlic in the bottom of a large casserole. And then get yourself a nice chuck roast or a boneless round. You want a cut of meat with flavor. And the tougher cuts have more flavor. I don't know why that is. This is a funny little piece of skin here called the silver skin, and you can get in there with your knife and kind of just pull it out. I'm going to get it off of this plate and onto a plastic board. That's really what I should have used in a perfect world with the bacon. You know what? There are 60 different cooking implements in this kitchen right now, and it always amazes me that I don't always pull out the right one. And we check it so carefully. I always say to the staff that it's the wages of sin, you know, that we always do the wrong thing. Now here we go. Pull this around here and just check to see if there's any particular fat or gristle that you want to get out. Oh, you might want to pick out a hunk like that. But they're trimming the meat so much these days when they sell it to you because of the concern that everyone has for fat. And you do want some fat in this because it'll make it taste better, and then you can always pour it off. But anyway, you top this with the roast. You season it with salt and pepper, and there is no other fat in here. Oh, this is a new gadget. Not real new, but semi-new. I love it. It has a little light that goes on as well, and your pepper and your salt. And then you cover it tightly and roast it for 2.5 to 3 hours. And after it's cooked about an hour, hour and a half, you have to go back and check it. You can't just leave it in there for all that time. If you really think it's getting done more than you like, stop cooking it then. It's probably cooked technically in a much shorter period of time than that. And now pull it out. Here it is, beautifully done. It's been turned. And now we've got just the perfect board here. Turned it over. Or I really like slicing on one of these, something like this wooden board that has a drain. And you want to slice it very thinly. Now the thing that's hard is that you never know when you start to cut this whether you're cutting it across the grain, whether you're cutting it the right way until you actually have a few pieces sliced. And of course, if you need to stretch it for a crowd, you slice it thinner. And if you don't have a crowd, then you can slice it much thicker. Put it on a platter. Here it is. It's just beautiful. And top it with the lovely juices and onion mixture in there. You can see that there's not much fat. If you really were concerned, you could look for it, but there really isn't much. And you just put this lovely mixture over the roast as we've done it here and serve it hot. But it reheats terrifically. It's just a wonderful thing to reheat. And I have frozen it. It's awfully nice. Even if you have a little piece, just freeze a little piece just for yourself. Now, let me show you the squash and zucchini casserole. It's really another favorite of mine. Let me tell you the ingredients for it first. 2.5 cups of sour cream or yogurt. Once again, if you're doing company, sour cream. If you're doing family, why not do yogurt? Then you haven't got all that fat and calories. 1 to 2, which is about 3/4 of a pound. Summer yellow squash sliced, or 1 or 2, about 3/4 of a pound. Again, zucchini sliced, and I should have said. So you want both squashes if you can get them. 2 tablespoons of mixed parsley and basil. A sliced onion. 1.5 cups of breadcrumbs. 1/2 cup of grated Swiss cheese. 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan. And 1/4 cup of butter. And it's really terrific. Now, the first thing that you want to do is to get the excess liquid out of that yogurt or sour cream. So you line a strainer, just a typical home strainer, with some cheesecloth, or even I've used those little kitchen wipes, you know, that works most of the time, and add the sour cream or yogurt. Or this is just a cup of the mixture in here just to show you how much liquid comes from 1 cup of sour cream. Or you can put it into one of these gadgets. There are some smaller ones available in the stores as well. And that's about how much liquid you'll get from just about a cup of the mixture. So you can see it's, you know, a lot of extra water. But you let it drain several hours. Room temperature, or I usually just throw it in the refrigerator and let it just keep draining it there. Meanwhile, preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And then slice your squash. And I have to tell you about this squash. It really tickled me the other day. Most of you know that I was very fortunate in life. Some years ago, 2 young teenage girls moved in with me. And the oldest one, Audrey, who was 17 when she moved in, has now married to a Frenchman, who I call my son-in-law because that's the way I feel about him and about her. And so he's married. He's a Frenchman, and his parents came over to visit me last week, visit us, and they had never seen yellow summer squash, which is so traditional and so typical in America. But what they know is the zucchini that they call the courgette. And, of course, in a lot of ways, particularly here in the South, that zucchini hasn't been around very long. So it's just amazing to me how different countries have an emphasis on different vegetables. You slice them both the same way. Cut off. This has got a little crook neck to it. And sometimes you get them even more crook-necked. And you just slice it, put your knife right on the board, and just slice like this. There we go. And that's done. And the same way here, if you're concerned about a wobble, and you still want it to get it round and pretty, and you care about that, you can cut that off. It won't be a perfect round, but nobody is going to look at your squash or your zucchini and say, you just want it level so that it doesn't wobble and you don't cut your hand. And nobody's going to say, I'll show you one slice. You see, nobody's going to say, oh my God, the zucchini was not a perfect round. It's not going to work that way. Now you want it about 1/4 inch thick just because you want it to cook at the right time, you know. If you get it much thicker, it's going to take longer. And then let's just chop some basil. Here's some lovely fresh basil. Here's some parsley. And just take the basil off of the stem, chop it down, and then walk your knife right over here. I'll just wipe my hands a second. I've got some goop on them. And then here's your parsley. You want to take it off of the stalk because otherwise it's just too, that parsley stalk is tough and it sticks in your throat. You just walk your knife and the small pieces fall to the bottom. And you just keep doing that. Now another thing that you can do is put your parsley into a glass or a cup and just cut it with the scissors. A lot of people do that, or you can pop it in one of the mini chopping gadgets that are going on around. Now, put your slices of squash on a baking sheet and bake them for about 10 minutes, your squash and your zucchini. If you only had squash, it would work, or only had zucchini, it would work too. Pull them out of the oven, and then turn the temperature of the oven down to 350, because what you're really making is a kind of a custard here, and that doesn't have eggs in it, but it's kind of a custard, and you don't want to overcook everything. And then you mix your squash and your zucchini and your herbs and your onion. You just throw them all together here. I know that you will do this immaculately at home. You will not throw them all around the kitchen. I get these letters all the time telling me I'm sloppy, and I keep thinking, oh, if they just had to come do it in front of the camera. You can't look down and see it all. Okay, pretend it's perfect. Now add your onion, your herbs, your 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs, and stir it all together here. And then you layer it in your casserole. I got some more herbs there. How bad could that be? You layer it in your casserole, and I'm so delighted these days that we have these very pretty casseroles to show you. You add your layer of your vegetable mixture, and then you add your Swiss cheese and your Parmesan. Oop, should layer it just a little at the time. And a layer of your sour cream. And just continue all that way up. Season it with salt and pepper when it's all the way done. And combine it with another, melt the butter, combine it with the breadcrumbs. Let's see, where did they go? Oh, I probably put them in something already. But anyway, you combine that with the breadcrumbs and you sprinkle the top over the casserole, and you're going to pay every bit of attention to what you do. You bake it for 45 minutes to an hour until it's brown and bubbly and delicious. I've got one to show you. But you know, if you did what I did and threw your breadcrumbs in because you got the phone bell rang or the doorbell rang or something like that, go ahead and not worry about picking out the breadcrumbs, but go ahead and mix the butter with some more breadcrumbs and put them on top, because you see it just makes it so wonderful to cut through that little crust before you get to that nice delicate mixture underneath.
While at Walt Disney World near Orlando, Florida, I met Mickey Mouse and I visited the Land Pavilion, which is part of Epcot Center. Sponsored by Kraft General Foods, it's an experimental greenhouse lab for finding ways of growing food for the future. It also provides an opportunity for visitors to learn about agricultural technology. I learned that these banana trees aren't trees at all. The body of the plant is actually underground along with the roots. What we call the tree is a fruiting stem. The leaves gather light to help feed the plant while it's producing flowers. These petals are protecting a bunch of immature bananas. The flowers at the end of each banana, upon pollination, will allow the banana to become a mature fruit. This particular variety is seedless and self-pollinating, so each flower will become a banana. Because they weigh so much, they neck over, and the whole bunch turns down. As the fruit develops, some bunches become so heavy that they have to be supported, as with this giant bamboo pole. It takes about a year for the shoot to rise, flower, and deliver mature fruit. Each stem produces bananas only once. Then it's cut down and a new sucker takes its place. Bananas are the most popular fruit in America. As you can see, Nikki and I both love them. They're among the oldest of domesticated fruits, and I imagine they'll still be around when we're growing plants out among the stars.
For nearly a century, LeCreuset's colorful French cookware has been a favorite in kitchens around the world. From its bold finishes and uncompromised quality to its easy-to-clean materials, the brand's range of iconic products are as easy to use as they are to love.
Banana carrot sheet cake with banana cream cheese frosting. And Ray developed this recipe, my good friend Ray, that's in charge of the kitchen, that gets everything ready to come out here. And I was just kind of on a whim. We wanted to do a carrot cake, but we were tired of just carrot cake, so I said, how about adding some bananas? So then he went ahead and did it. And it's really delicious. Let me read you the ingredients so you can write them down, and then I'll show you how to put them together. The first thing is a cup of chopped pecans. Then you have 1 1/2 cups of grated carrots, about 5 medium. 1 1/2 cups of mashed bananas, about 3 large. 1/4 cup of toasted coconut. 3 cups of flour. A teaspoon of baking soda. A teaspoon of cinnamon, salt. 1/2 teaspoon of cloves. 1/2 teaspoon of mace, which you know is the top of the outside of a nutmeg. 1 1/2 cup of packed light brown sugar. A cup of butter. 3 eggs. A tablespoon of vanilla, and 3/4 cup of milk. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And then just go ahead and grease and flour. You can use one of these sprays or grease and flour it yourself. I've just gotten bone lazy about these things. And grease and flour, it's a 13 by 9 by 2 inch pan. And then grate your carrots. Peel them if you so desire. You don't have to grate them in something like this. If you're fortunate enough to have a good food processor, that'll work just fine. And even some of those little mooley things work well, too. Mash your bananas with a fork. You just peel them and mash them. And this is a nice thing to do with kind of bananas that are over the hill. And then you mix together your pecans and your carrots and your bananas and your toasted coconut. Isn't that nice, that toasted coconut? And just put them all together in your bowl and leave it. You're going to combine them later with the rest of your ingredients. And then over here, you're going to sift together the flour, the baking soda, the cinnamon, the salt, the ground cloves, and the mace. And I want to show you this just so you see it while I think about it. This is a nutmeg, and mace is the outside of the nutmeg. You can't even see it. It's kind of a brown thing that goes over the top of it. And if you were using nutmeg, you would just do it. If you wanted fresh nutmeg, you would do it there. That's not for this, but it was there, and I wanted to show it to you what I thought about it. There's some already in here, as you can see. Now go ahead and sift all of this together. Fresh nutmeg is always the best. And if you can get that mace, it's terrific, too. But usually you have to go someplace like Curacao to get it. I think that's where my last one came from, or Barbados. Someone brought it back for me. Now, if don't get one of those sifter gadgets, one of the metal gadgets that goes back and forth. Just go ahead and use a sifter like this. And meanwhile, beat together your light brown sugar and the butter until light and fluffy. I've got my butter in there. Let me add my sugar. You can see everything's measured out ahead of time. You really have to measure everything out ahead of time when you're baking. I know when you're home cooking, you want to wing it. And like for the zucchini bake, it wouldn't matter if you measured that all ahead of time. You could fudge that if things weren't perfect. But when you're baking, you really have to measure out ahead of time because too many things happen. Life is too complicated. We get interrupted. We get distracted. The phone rings. Someone comes to see us. It's just like what happened to me over there. You start rushing up on what you're doing, and you forget. So you beat in your eggs until it's smooth. And then separately, you just mix together your vanilla and your milk. And now I'm going to fold all of this in there. I'm going to hope not to make a mess. Beginning and ending with the dry ingredients. You beat the flour and the milk mixtures in. Actually, I'm not going to add that other stuff yet. And so you add your flour, some of it, and you all know what's going to happen to me is that it's all going to fly up. There is a little thing that you can put over this so it doesn't fly up and make a mess. Whew, I made it. And then you just fold this in very quickly. Here's that. You can beat this in. It doesn't matter about folding. It's not a delicate cake where you have to fold it in, in a perfect manner. And, everybody always worries. I get all these letters. You worry about what's left over at the end of the beaters. I promise you, it gets all used up. It doesn't go to waste. And we use every last bit here. And nothing goes to waste in this kitchen. So we even recycle. And we even wash our plastic bags. So there. And you mix all of this together and reuse them. You mix this all together and put it into your pan. It is just delicious. Gosh, is it good? It's so nice. It's just so different. You know, it's just a little touch different, just nice enough. And you bake it 30 to 35 minutes until it comes out clean, springs back. You are really going to be thrilled with this. Spread it out perfectly in your pan. I know you're at home, so you will do all of this beautifully. And then you're going to bake it, as I said, 30 to 35 minutes, and then you let it cool completely. And then you frost it with your banana cream cheese frosting, or you dust it with confectioner's sugar. But I want to show you how to make the frosting before I do all that. I'll get rid of my grated carrots and show you how to just combine this. Now, this makes a gracious plenty of frosting, and the leftover frosting refrigerates. We have even frozen it, and it's good for just pulling out and putting on, any myriad of things. But because it's still in the pan, and if you want to, you can turn it out of the pan, and then you need all the frosting. But I'm just going to coat it in the pan, so therefore I've only made a half recipe from what's in the book. But the actual ingredients here are 1/4 cup of butter, 6 ounces of cream cheese, 2 tablespoons of sour cream, 1/2 a banana mashed, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. And then you add that dash of nutmeg that I just showed you, and 1/2 of a 16-ounce package of confectioner's sugar. And you just beat the butter and the cream cheese and the sour cream until they're light. And then you add the banana and the vanilla. This banana's been sitting out for a little while, and even though it turns a little brown, it doesn't really seem to make a difference at all. Even when that icing turns a little brown and in the refrigerator, it's still terrific. It really is good. And the confectioner's sugar. And I'm going to do this with the mixer. So it's going to make a little noise here. That, if you weren't watching, I would lick that. I now have to figure out what to do about it so that you think that I'm immaculate. It's just delicious. It's terrific. It's so easy, too. You know, this is the kind of recipe that you want to do when you have kids around, or somebody that's a little intimidated by baking, because it's pretty hard to mess this recipe up, except that you do get so much icing. Now, go ahead and spread this over your cooled cake. I have one here already ready. You can see it's been sitting for a while, and it's turned a little funny, but other than that, it's okay. And I'm just going to spread this over the cake. Now, you have to have your cake cooled, because if it's not, of course, it will melt all of this, which is delicious, but not very practicable for serving it. So go ahead and just spread it over. Why not use the whole thing? Why not? It's delicious. It is so good. And this freezes very well, wrapped tightly. You know, I'm sure you all wrap everything tightly for your freezer. It's just delicious. And you can see that if you wanted to do the whole recipe, that you could have a little more icing. How bad could that be? Now, the parsley and chive potatoes. And as I said, this menu is really nice because it goes for the family, or it goes for just next-door neighbors, or even, I think just about anybody likes a home-cooked meal. Anybody is so grateful to be invited over for something that you cook that from best friends to the boss, I believe you could just about do that. Now, let me read you the ingredients. I keep forgetting to do that. We're sort of doing this differently these days. You want 3 pounds of new potatoes, scrubbed and peeled, and those aren't peeled. I'll tell you about that later. 1 shallot chopped. This is a shallot. That's the whole shallot chopped. 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter, which are in the pan here. 1 to 2 heaping tablespoons of finely chopped parsley. I showed you how to drill that earlier. 1 to 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. 1 to 2 teaspoons of chopped fresh tarragon, and 1 to 1/2 to 1 heaping tablespoon of fresh chopped chives, these beautiful fresh chives. Now, new potatoes are technically smaller than this. A lot of people think that all red potatoes are new potatoes, but that's really not true. Just because they're red doesn't mean that they're new. These guys are just slightly over the hill for new potatoes. So for these, you would have to peel them for this recipe, and they might cook a little longer, and you wouldn't put them into boiling water. You might put them into cold water and bring them up to the boil. Really new potatoes, you like going into boiling water. You treat them like a green vegetable because they are green. They're so fresh, and they're so sweet. Sometimes you call them creamers. Anyway, you just cut that little belt around the middle of this, and you peel your shallot. I've cut that in half, and you chop it just like you would an onion. You cut into the root like this, and then across, and then down. And you have your chopped parsley and your beautiful chopped chives. Here we are there with these chives. You put your potatoes in the water to cover, and you bring them to the boil, cook them till tender, or as I said, if they're really big guys, you put them into cold water and bring them up to a boil. Cook them about 20 to 30 minutes. Just be sure they're done. Then you drain them, and you set them aside. Then when you're ready for them, or even a few minutes ahead, see, you don't have to rush to get, this whole meal can be fixed ahead of time. I mean, it is not worth trying to do this at the last minute. You saute your shallot in the butter until it's tender, and then you add the parsley and the lemon juice and the tarragon and the chives, and then you season it to taste, and I'm just going to add these drained potatoes just to show you how you, oh, here they are right here, how you would just stir them all in here. See, that kind of reheats it, and then you just reheat it all together. You add the potatoes to reheat it once it's all cooked. It's just delicious, and it's easy. It's easy to fix ahead. I hope you'll really like this. I'm going to show you the whole thing all together. Today's menu included beef braised with mahogany onions, along with squash and zucchini casserole and parsley and chive potatoes. Finally, there's banana carrot sheet cake with banana cream cheese frosting. For dessert, the cake's a little large for 4, but it is great to take along for family reunions, and it freezes. I hope these dishes will become some of your family favorites.